Opening day is upon us, and with that, an annual rite of passage, the MLB Predictions Extravaganza with dear friend, the endlessly entertaining Conor Reilly. Conor, this is our 19th straight year sharing our baseball predictions, a fourth straight year doing it in podcast form. And I think today we can follow a structure that has stood the test of time, running through our predictions division by division, some postseason picks, individual awards, and of course, our props and hops regular season win total beer bet, where we will run through 3 regular season win total picks a piece. Loser will pick up the tab for the winner. And we are getting this in under the gun this year, but we are getting it in nevertheless on opening day. Quick background for those of you who may be new to this or could use a refresher. Conor was my roommate high above Commonwealth Avenue at Boston University way back in the 2005-06 school year, back when his Mets and my Angels were actually good. Alas, gone are the days of Pedro Martinez and David Wright, Bartolo Colon and Vladimir Guerrero Sr., that is, but we carry on. And a big part of why we carry on is because our relationship is bigger than baseball. Regular listeners may know Conor was the officiant at my wedding back in 2014. And fortunately, I'll be present to witness him tying the knot himself this summer. Conor, welcome back to Props and Hops. And for the sake of a coherent conversation, let's just say I'm glad we're getting this in before we descend upon Las Vegas for your bachelor party in a few weeks.
Matt, it is so great to be here again. Thank you so much for having me, for that great introduction. One of my favorite days of the year, as you said, opening day, literally here in the United States. Cannot wait for baseball. Cannot wait to celebrate with you in Las Vegas. You're a gem of gems. So great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, for those sharing the excitement for opening day, watching live with us on YouTube and Twitter, thank you for tuning in, and feel free to weigh in on the chat with any questions or comments. We'll look to work that into the show where possible. Conor, let's start where I think we have before, and let's say the hops are batting leadoff today, this morning, actually. The hops and the morning hours can be a dicey proposition. So drinking a full beer, maybe not advisable during this conversation at this hour, but that doesn't mean we can't enjoy a ceremonial first sip, if you will. Do you have anything on hand today?
I do. And as far as I'm concerned, Matt, I'm still pretty sure I've yet to hit a World Series winner in our 19 years doing this, but I've also never drank a morning beer doing this. So maybe this is the change of pace that we need. This one is called Irish Goodbye. Got a really cool little leprechaun there. It is a red ale brewed in the Cape May Courthouse, New Jersey. We got it for St. Patrick's Day. A few were left over. It's from the Bucket Brigade Brewery. So a little alliteration as well, but Irish Goodbye will be what we're drinking. Goodbye to the winter, goodbye to the cold months here in New York, and hello baseball. So happy to drink this today.
All right, a great pick on your end. We'll see if I can hold up my end of the bargain. The last 3 years, I've gone with a beer by the name of Baseball Lager by Highland Park Brewery. This year, gonna throw a curveball, a new beer called What Good Curves Can You Throw? This is a West Coast Pilsner with Motueka hops, 5.4% ABV, by my favorite brewery, Green Cheek Beer Company, based in Orange, California. And I'll hold up the can again here because there's a saying that you drink with your eyes first. And I just love the can art here. The audience live on YouTube and Twitter, those catching this on Spotify as well can get a look here. So I just love the branding. We've got Green Cheek's mascot, Cheeky the Parrot, in a baseball uniform, complete with a bat. And I think it's just a fun reminder that Green Cheek takes the quality of its beer very seriously, but they don't let that interfere with having fun along the way. Onto the beer itself, light, excuse me, it is the morning hours. My voice is still warming up, so I'm sure the beer is going to help that. But this beer, light and crisp with a slight crackery flavor, kind of in line with most Pilsners. What's different here is that the Motueka hops definitely take it up a notch. Adding a citrusy touch, think that classic lemon-lime combo. I think, as you might guess by the name of the beer, by the baseball can art, it would be the ideal type of drink for a warm day at the ballpark or just about anywhere for that matter. So, Conor, on that note, cheers. All right, there's some good sound effects. Cheers, buddy.
To you, man. Let's get some winners.
Okay. Yeah, and with that, I think I have set a new personal record for earliest time of day drinking beer. Unless you count 3 or 4 a.m. as early, I guess we could say that if that's the case, we might challenge that record in a few weeks in Vegas.
I guess the earliest time since the sun is fully in the air that you drank a beer. Yeah, so not necessarily the AM hour, but the sun has risen the earliest time. But I think we'll give it a run for its money during those Vegas days for sure.
There we go. And since the sun has indeed risen, let's get to it. We will start off with, I think we've dubbed in the past, our retreat to move forward, a little wink and a nod to 30 Rock, a recap of last year's results. Connor, when we get to the division winners, I think you're going to like this. Both of us had Atlanta in the NL East. Not a stretch, but not bad at plus 110, especially considering the 14-game cushion with which the Braves claimed the division. NL Central, you took me to the cleaners here. You hit big on Milwaukee at plus 165, and the Brewers won it going away, 9 games ahead of the second place Cubs. I took St. Louis as a clear favorite, minus 125, and they came up merely 21 games short en route to a last place finish. In the NL West, you had the Dodgers correct at minus 125. You called it a value. And one thing that stood out to me during the conversation was that it's rare for a division winner to really have value at that price point. See my pick for St. Louis in the NL Central, for that matter, at that same price point. But you could not have been much more right. The Dodgers won the division by 16 games, 18 games ahead of my pick, the Padres. So, Connor, congrats on sweeping the NL division winners last season.
Thank you so much. I would love if we stopped there because I know what's coming in the American League, but it was a success in the National League. A little chalky, if you will, but the Brewers, I have a couple of those this year, just the by default division winners, just didn't love anyone else. And the Brewers have just been pretty kind to me the last 5 years or so. So National League went quite well last year, thankfully.
Yeah, and in the American League, I think in the East, we'll start there. We were both wrong, as you alluded to, but we had plenty of company. I think few people saw Baltimore taking the league by storm in 2023. You had Toronto winning the division. I had the Yankees. Once again, directionally speaking, you were more accurate. The Blue Jays finished 7 games better than the Yankees. And also, to your credit in the AL East, you did make a bold prediction. The Yankees would miss the playoffs at plus 330. So even though you didn't get the division winner correct, another great call by you come the AL East predictions.
I was catching up on last year's picks that we did. I was listening yesterday, and you kind of started the podcast with the teaser of me saying the Yankees won't make the playoffs, sounding so confident. I was like, oh, I wish everyone just stopped listening there. They think I'm the biggest genius in the world. Just don't worry about everything else. Just take my Yankees no playoffs. Obviously, as a huge Mets fan, that was kind of biased, but it did work out well. It was a shot in the dark that did pay off well compared to my other American League shots in the dark, which didn't pay off so well.
And on that note, the AL Central was a reality check. You picked the White Sox to win the division. A credit at least for going out on a limb. They were plus 300 at the time, although they lost more than 100 games, so they definitely did not claim the AL Central. I took Cleveland, another ho-hum miss for my division picks. Connor, in the AL West, kind of similar to the NL East, we both got it right, and we didn't have to reach very far to do so. Houston, the winner, no surprise as a minus 180 favorite. A surprise that you did foresee coming out of the AL West. You alluded to an inclination on Texas to make the playoffs. Despite being 10-1 underdogs to win the division, not only did they make the playoffs, of course, they won their first World Series. So in a nutshell, with our division picks, extraordinary performance by you. You got 4 out of the 6 division winners correct. And for good measure, Yankees to miss the playoffs at plus 330. And that lean to Texas making the playoffs, something that few others saw coming. And if we're going to give you a solid A for that performance, I'm afraid it's got to be an F for me. I got 2 pieces of low-hanging fruit in Atlanta and Houston. That leaves plenty of room for improvement this season, if nothing else. When we look at the postseason last year, things got off the rails for both of us. We'll just talk about our World Series picks for the purposes of this show. Connor, you had Toronto over your beloved Mets. Neither team won a game in the playoffs, but at least Toronto made the playoffs. I guess the saving grace from my perspective here would be that I had the Blue Jays as a wild card team bowing out early. And I'm glad I at least got that right, because my World Series pick was the Padres over the Mariners. Took a big swing, produced a big miss on that front. Like Texas entering the season last year, neither the Padres nor the Mariners has won a World Series. So I guess you could say that at least I predicted a first-time champion. Of course, Texas ended up beating Arizona in the World Series. And we can just put a pin in that thought for when we rehash last year's regular season win total beer bet pretty shortly here. But first, Connor, individual awards. MVP in the NL, you had Mookie Betts at plus 950. I had Nolan Arenado at 14-1. Winner was Ronald Acuna by unanimous decision. You mentioned you were considering him, and I had picked him in the past. So maybe that's a classic case like many near misses we've had in this market over the years of close but no cigar.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Betts did finish in second, and I think Freeman was in the top five as well. So the whole cannibalizing votes thing kind of got challenged there as well. But it was Arenado. The whole Cardinals season was just shot for you. That was a tough draw for you across the board. But Cunha left no doubt. He did kind of everything that you thought he'd do a year earlier. So it's a tough call for you, but he was sensational.
And speaking of leaving no doubt, the AL, Julio Rodriguez didn't come through, but a good look for you at 9-1. Shohei Ohtani did claim the award. He was available at plus 220 when we recorded. A correct call by me, albeit the obvious call. Not great for entertainment value, but I think that was some positive reinforcement for me that longer shots often aren't as rewarding as we might like them to be. Like Acuna, Ohtani was a unanimous MVP last season, and that made it the first time in a voting process dating back to 1931 that both MVPs won the award unanimously. In the Cy Young market, National League winner you pegged Brandon Woodruff at 12-1. Brandon Woodruff at 20-1. I took a 12-1 long shot on Max Fried. The winner was Blake Snell, one of the few pro Padres picks that I didn't make. In the American League, you had Dylan Cease at 9-1. I had George Kirby at 60-1. That was wishful thinking. We know how that often goes when long shots are involved. Garrett Cole ended up claiming the American League Cy Young Award last season. And when it comes to our favorite part of the show, I think that regular season win total beer bet, definitely my favorite part of the show as far as last year is concerned. That's the one upper hand that I got. You had Texas under 81.5 wins. That conflicted with your playoff pick and your allegiance to Jacob deGrom. And while that pick was wrong, Texas won 90 games, not to mention the World Series. You did nail your second pick, Pittsburgh over 67.5. They won 76 games, so that was a comfortable win for you. Your third pick was Cincinnati under 65.5. Ellie De La Cruz had other ideas. Cincinnati finished with a winning record at 82-80. On my end, I had Arizona over 75.5, one of my better calls and maybe one of your few bad calls last season because you chose it as the tiebreaker in our beer bet. And not only did Arizona sail over, they won 84 games to sneak into the playoffs, ended up winning the NL pennant. So, Connor, you faded not one, but both World Series teams last year when it came to our regular season win total beer bet. As the victor, I'm not going to complain, but I do think that was a fun thing to see that both teams that made surprise runs at the World Series were teams that you weren't so bullish on. So you were very prescient on the Yankees. Maybe the Rangers and Diamondbacks just both caught a lot of people sleeping. So you had plenty company as far as that was concerned.
Very humbling to see the deep October runs by the teams that I completely faded. Yeah, we flew too close to the sun on the Yankee pick. We flew too close to the sun. We refresh, we recharge, we turn the page. But yeah, it was a very, very fun pick show last year. Hits and misses for sure. But let's get them all right this year, okay?
We'll do our best. One team, picking up on what you just said there, one team that did not fly too close to the sun last year, the Kansas City Royals. I had them under 69.5. That got me off to a 2-for-2 start, as the Royals only won 56 games to challenge the A's for the worst record in baseball. But 2-0 is where the good run stopped because I had Miami under 76.5 to round things out. That was wrong. They won 84 games. So the outcome in last year's regular season win total beer bet, you went 1-2. I went 2-1, which was a solid rebound after going an embarrassing 0-3 in 2022. And Connor, this is where it might get a little bit awkward to make you pick up a tab for me when we're in Vegas next month, since it'll be your bachelor party. But if memory serves me correctly, you do still owe me for this one. And that might be the ideal occasion to settle up.
Fair is fair. Absolutely. You could bank it. Six on me.
All right, there we go. 6. That'll get us through about half a night, perhaps, but we will make that work. We'll take it and run with it. Moving right along to our 2024 predictions. A disclaimer right off the top here that these are more for entertainment value than betting value. The numbers that we're seeing, especially this close to the season starting, have really been hammered into place over time by and large. And we don't make our money betting on baseball. These are small bets, if any, for both of us. And I think it's more about predictions than where we're seeing bets that show value. That said, the goal here is to provide value wherever we can, but please don't feel compelled to rush to the betting window and jam in any last-minute bets based on anything you hear in this episode. Connor, they say hope springs eternal. For Mets and Angels fans like us, I feel like hope might be about the most ephemeral thing there is these days. So fortunately, that still leaves us with 28 other teams to contemplate. Let's get to it as we talk division winners. We'll note the odds for each division winner we're predicting as of the last price check as we go through this exercise. Connor, let's kick it off as we have in recent years in the National League East, where your Mets reside, although I'm guessing the Mets might not be your pick to win the division this season.
I'm certainly more at peace with him than last year, relying on Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, which just feels like a fever dream at this point. That was like the anchor of their entire team. Just seeing what they have now. The National League East for me, I do have no surprise here. The Braves minus 280 to win this division. I just see nothing in their structure that suggests this year nor several years to come they won't be rock solid across the board. Whether it's the all-star lineup they have or just the really strong depth in their pitching, I have no hesitation at all. Minus 280 on the Braves to win it all, followed closely by the World Series runner-up, the Phillies. Then I think I could sneak my Mets into third in front of Miami. That would probably be a coin flip. So Mets, Marlins, and Nationals, a distant fifth, rounding out this division.
All right, a couple of things there. First off, the Braves are my projected winner as well, and I'm seeing them right now at minus 240 at DraftKings. So minus 280 doesn't even seem like too steep a price given how strong they look relative to the competition. But a little shopping around, and we can call this one minus 240. We'll see later on what may be to come. I don't know if it was a Freudian slip, but I think I heard you say the Braves to win it all, or maybe that was just to win it all as far as the NL East is concerned. And then Phillies World Series runners-up a couple years ago, if memory serves me correctly. That was when they knocked off the Padres in the NLCS, much to my chagrin as a native San Diegan. But as far as the NL East in 2024 is concerned, I've got the same exact rundown as you, so I won't belabor the point. My final note on the Braves price points, again, at DraftKings, that minus 240 feels like a relative bargain, especially because I've been seeing them north of minus 280 at Bookmaker, which is a sharp offshore, and even as high as minus 350 at Bet Online, which is another prominent offshore. So if anybody is considering any potential bets, line shopping in markets like this can make all the difference. But Connor, it seems like the NL East, pretty straightforward as far as we're concerned from what we can tell at this point. Let's see if that holds up or deviates when it gets to the NL Central. What have you got there?
Yeah, pardon that slip up there. It's early morning beer for me too. I know the Diamondbacks made the World Series last year. That was 2 years ago. That's on me. That's the only one of the whole podcast. I promise. We're gonna take a little bit of swing
here. It's
all
good. Getting the mulligan out of the way with the first division.
That's it. Turn the page. Taking a little bit of a bomb on the NL Central. I'm gonna take the Cubs. I had on my reading was plus 200 on the Cubs to win this division. I have them followed up by the Cardinals, Reds, Pirates, and Brewers. I do believe in this new Cubs manager, Craig Counsell. He did establish a lot of things in Milwaukee that allowed me to bet them successfully. So I'll kind of ride with him on this. The rotation's a little iffy in Chicago, but Mr. Steele came out of nowhere to be one of the Cy Young, favorites last year. Hopefully he can keep it going along with Kyle Hendricks. But I do have the Cubs in a surprise winning this division.
All right, this is one where I think in the past we've deviated quite a bit, but here we've got some really strong alignment. The only difference is fourth and fifth place, where I've got Milwaukee in fourth, Pittsburgh in fifth, and you flip that. Otherwise, we have Chicago, St. Louis, Cincinnati as our 1, 2, 3 in both cases. Unlike the NL East, this is why I'm a bit surprised. The Braves were a runaway favorite, so no surprise there, but we're both aligned on the Cubs. I think it's pretty neck and neck when I was trying to pick between the Cubs and the Cardinals to win this division. What nudged me in favor of Chicago, full disclosure, when I first drafted this, I did have St. Louis winning the division. But Gil Alexander on his Beating the Book podcast noted that the Cubs seem to be undervalued in the sense that they were one of the most unlucky teams in baseball last year in terms of both the Pythagorean record and sequencing. So Pythagorean record basically accounting for run differential, looking at runs scored versus runs allowed, and then sequencing, looking at how those runs were scored, is a very rudimentary example. If a 3-batter sequence goes walk, home run, strikeout, that's 2 runs. And if you go home run, walk, strikeout, that's only 1 run. So the same 3 things happen, but in which order, that's a little bit random. It tends to regress to the mean over time. Cubs very unlucky in those 2 departments last year, and that could bode well for some positive regression in 2024. Anything else, Connor, that stood out as you were figuring out? You mentioned kind of going out a bit on a limb with the Cubs at 2-1. anything you haven't spoken to yet that made you inclined to give them the nod over the Cardinals or the rest of the NL Central competition?
Well, I know we don't love narratives here, but I do have a brief story on the Cubs. Last year, my fiance and I did go to a Cubs game, and we must have bought the tickets through the Cubs website. So just about a week ago, I was looking for a sign in this division, a sign that something to come my way. I got an email from the Cubs, and I guess the new thing MLB does is the email said, "Your Chicago Cubs are coming to New York." So it was an email for a Mets versus Cubs game, and they branded me as the Cubs, like they're coming to your area. I was like, this might be a sign. So I said, they're my Chicago Cubs in this email. They gotta be my Chicago Cubs for this division. And so I'm rolling with them. So besides that, Bellinger being signed is also a key in the real world, but mostly by default, but taking the Cubs here and feeling pretty good about it.
All right. It may be tempting fate not to do so. So we'll see if it is indeed meant to be for the Cubs and the NL Central this year. Connor, how about the NL West?
So the NL West, I'm not going to shock anyone here. The Dodgers, the book I checked this morning, they had them at minus 550 to win this division, which I hate to laugh at it. But so I'd like to know your thoughts on this. I feel like I got a little on the creative side. If I took the Braves and the Dodgers in a division parlay, that came to minus 166. So you might get a little more value taking them as a duo since they're so overwhelming. But in this division in a vacuum, the Dodgers are minus 550, followed up by the Padres, so I expect to be in the playoffs, the Diamondbacks, so I continue to fade for some reason. I'm sure it'll make me look foolish again, and the Giants, and they far fifth, the Colorado Rockies.
All right, so another division with a lot of similarity here. I too have the Dodgers winning it to nobody's surprise, Padres in second. Just a flip-flop third and fourth, I have the Giants over Arizona. My initial draft here followed your exact order as I did some basic prep listening to some of the podcasts in my regular arsenal that did baseball previews. I don't know. I detected a whiff of some Giants optimism that didn't seem to be there for Arizona. So I flip-flopped those two teams, but kind of like what you said with the Cubs, I can't pinpoint exactly why. So I'm not the best suited to say, with conviction, why one of us may be right, the other may be wrong. I think the Dodgers are a clear favorite. And then between the Padres, D-backs, and Giants, it could kind of go in any order. And the Rockies seem like, if there is a lock, I pretty much never use that word and nothing would fully stun me. But if there is a lock here, it might be Rockies to finish last by a healthy margin in the NL West. As far as the pricing goes that you mentioned for this division, Dodgers at minus 150. I wish minus 550. I heard you say, and I'm seeing also at DraftKings minus 450. So while that is still a steep price, and I wouldn't be rushing to bet it for comparison's sake, I'm seeing as high as minus 650 at Bet Online. So that minus 550 you saw was kind of right in the middle, maybe more in line with market consensus. I think I learned my lesson last year fading the Dodgers. I just can't pick a different team with a straight face this time around. As far as your Dodgers Braves division winner parlay goes, I think that's an interesting look just to reduce the price point at which you've got to risk both of these teams to win their divisions. My best guess is that it's probably priced in, and my initial reaction to most parlays is that it's a nice way for the book to conceal a little bit of extra vig. So if you're laying, what did you say, minus 166?
Yeah, with the minus 550, yeah. And then the Braves are minus 280 on my end. So maybe a little better than what I said, but
yeah, that's fair. So if we're looking at minus 166, your break-even percentage on that is 62.4%. And I would guess based on how books like to add a little bit of vig into their parlays, the true odds might be just a touch south of 60%. I can't dispute the look that like both of those two teams winning their divisions sounds good. And it's a lot more comfortable to lay minus 166 than a steep price for either of these two teams in a vacuum. So I totally hear you there. One thing that I have in the back of my mind now when it comes to how this division may unfold, a potential risk with the Dodgers. I can't really avoid the whole Ohtani situation right now. And that might potentially mean there could be value on some other teams to win the division just because of possible fallout from the Ohtani situation. And I think I can only say in good conscience that there's so much we don't know. And I am not in a spot here to stoop to gossip or speculation, but I just think we can't dismiss the possibility that he might get suspended, or he could just be distracted to the extent that it affects his performance a little bit. So I think it's worth acknowledging that this could happen. But like you, as far as this division goes, I'm predicting that it won't happen.
Yeah, it would seem like it would take something borderline surreal to derail them, and this definitely qualifies as something borderline surreal. So maybe you're onto something there. Yeah.
All right. Well, if I am, then we'll see. Maybe the Padres, Giants, or D-backs could make a run, but unless something surreal is to really blow up, then we'll stick with our Dodgers picks in the NL West and move on to the American League. Again, working our way east to west. So starting in the East, Connor, how's it looking for you?
In the AL East, what do they say? The definition of insanity is trying something over and over, expecting different results. Well, label me it because Toronto Blue Jays, I saw plus 380. Let's go. Let's do it. I believe the kids are getting a little more experience, whether it's Vlad, whether it's Biggio, whether it's Bichette. The rotation looks good to me with Gossman and Berrios, Chris Bassett. If Alek Manoah ever got his stuff in order, it could be really solid. Justin Turner seems like a perfect veteran presence. If he still has a year or two left in him, I will take the Blue Jays to come in first yet again, followed by the Orioles, Yankees, Rays, and oh boy, a distant fifth, Boston Red Sox. Haven't said that in a while, or very rarely over the last decade or so. So that's my lineup for the AL East.
All right. Well, this is one where we do have a little bit of discrepancy at the top. Finally, your Toronto pick, by the way, I think plus 380 was the price point you noted. I am once again at DraftKings, currently seeing that at plus 400. So small difference, but a little bit of shopping around. Might as well take the 4-1 there if you're so inclined. I went with Baltimore to win this division at 2-1. I've been seeing that price at FanDuel. And my first thought here was to fade Baltimore, thinking they could be due for some regression to the mean, coming back to earth after a great 2023 season. But my second thought was that FanDuel's odds favor the Yankees pretty firmly in this division, and Bookmaker has Baltimore and the Yankees much closer together. So it's a tight discrepancy here. No surprise either way for me, but I will side directionally with the sharper book. And if I was debating between Baltimore and the Yankees to win the division, giving the nod to the Orioles, going to slap the Yankees in second, Toronto in third, Tampa in fourth, and then, like you said, Boston a pretty distant fifth. It feels like a pretty clear toss-up to me for first and second between the Orioles and the Yankees, although I can see plenty of upside for the Blue Jays. To me, it was more of another toss-up between Toronto and Tampa Bay if we're looking at third and fourth. And then, as you said, quite the surprise here, but almost a given, kind of like the NL West with Colorado, almost a given in this division that the Red Sox will be bringing up the rear.
Yeah, which again, very, very rare to say. I think, despite the hate they get, I think baseball is in a healthier spot when Boston is successful, but does not look like one of those years this year.
Yeah, well, when it comes to teams that will be successful in the AL Central, what does that division look like for you, Connor, going from top to bottom?
This one I was looking. This is the one I didn't feel great on last year, so I said, why not Chicago? Let's just do it. This year I'm going to go with the Twins. I'm not in love with it though. I found them minus 130. The rotation looks solid. Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan and Chris Paddock used to be like the sensation of all of pitching when he was in his rookie year. He's now landed there. They got some injuries in the bullpen, but nonetheless, the lineup, if they're not spectacular, but they're solid, I'll take the Twins to squeak it out over the Tigers in second, Guardians in third, who I think will be greatly affected by Terry Francona leaving last year, and then the Royals and White Sox. Get out of my life, get out of my everything. You are in last place, lose every game. I'm done with you.
All right, a bad day for the Sox between the Red Sox and the White Sox. I'm with you there, and I'm with you at the top of this division as well, going with Minnesota. Maybe it's because I'm not in a regulated state. I don't know what books you were checking, but I'm seeing a few small discrepancies from your numbers that would be favorable at DraftKings. So you quoted minus 130. I am currently seeing minus 115 on my end at DraftKings. So a minus money favorite to win a division, not going out on a limb, but I too struggled to find good reason to side with anybody else to claim the AL Central crown. So Twins for me, and then Cleveland, Detroit, Kansas City, and the White Sox. So we're flip-flopping Detroit and Cleveland 2 and 3. I kind of like your look. This is one where if I had gone back, kind of like the NL West, where we had Arizona and San Francisco flip-flopped. as I did a little bit more homework here, I just caught more optimism around the Tigers than I did around Cleveland. So maybe in hindsight, I should have gone with your exact order, but for the sake of the show, at least we disagree on something, even though the top and bottom are looking pretty much eye to eye as far as we're seeing it there. And the AL West, we'll see if there's any discrepancy. I feel like this one might be the cleanest top to bottom, at least in terms of how we would predict it at this stage. But Connor, how does the AL West look for you?
Maybe I was feeling a little guilty on the AL Central Twins kind of blasé favorite pick. So I did go with a team that was your darlings last year, the Seattle Mariners, who I had at plus 300. And by the way, this might be a great ad for DraftKings. These were all New York FanDuel lines this morning. All lines I'm grabbing with these. So on FanDuel was plus 300 for Seattle, followed by obviously a very close second, the Astros. Rangers will be right there in the mix in third. Then kind of the divide we're expecting, I think, between the third and fourth place, where we get to the Angels and then the A's in fifth. But I think Luis Castillo anchoring the rotation. Ride New York's George Kirby. We've heard all about him last year, and really he did very representative as well. I think he was top 10 in the Cy Young last year. So all credit to you on kind of find that out of nowhere. I've always loved Mitch Garver, who was a catcher. I think he's going to DH for them because they have Cal Raleigh, a catcher. And Mitch Haniger, I think, left Seattle for a while. It was weird. He belongs in Seattle. There should have been never a time Mitch Haniger was out of Seattle. Jorge Polanco, I just think they got enough. And the Astros, one of these years, he keeps saying, they may come crashing down a little bit. Sure, give me Seattle at plus 300 on my end.
This is one where the FanDuel line is doing you a solid because I'm seeing plus 285 at DraftKings. So there's a slight discrepancy working in your favor looking at FanDuel's numbers. And I think that the way you laid it out, you've clearly done your homework. And I'm glad to hear that there is a bit of discrepancy here because I did, in tried and true form, go the more boring route. I just couldn't see a path to not picking the Astros to win this division. I would strongly prefer, like with most years, I would strongly prefer that our discrepancies be more right on your end than mine. I just feel like it's so much more likely that Houston claims this division. So I slotted them in first, Texas in second, Seattle in third, the Angels in fourth, and the A's in fifth. I felt like, well, it's more likely than not that my breakdown is not going to end up being the correct order finish. It was the division that to me had the clearest separation between each individual team from top to bottom. I was going to ask if you agreed or disagreed with that notion, but it seems like with some of the bullishness on Seattle, fortunately, there is some disagreement on that front.
Yeah, I think, it's just purely a speculative Houston keeps chugging. And, as they say, they keep rolling along until they don't. So maybe it's this year. And if it is, I would love to hop on Seattle plus 300.
Well, if Seattle comes through, it would be fun to see them in the postseason, and we'll see a dozen teams in the postseason, this year being the second year of a new format where we've got 12 teams total, 6 from each league. I had to do my own homework here to make sure that I gave picks in a logical sequence that could actually be possible with the new postseason format here. 3 division winners plus 3 wildcard teams in each league. Basically, the top 2 division winners will bypass a best of 3 wildcard round. And then in that wild card round, we'll have the 3 seed being the division winner with the worst record, hosting the 6 seed, which will be the wild card team with the worst record. And then in the other matchup, the 4 seed, the wild card team with the best record, hosting the 5 seed, the wild card team with the second best record. From there, fortunately, it's basically the division series, league championship series, and World Series format as we've known it. Connor, how's the National League playoff picture looking on your end?
So with that wonderful breakdown, I think I did also get this right in terms of the logistics. I do have the 2 bye teams, surprising to nobody. The Dodgers and the Braves, not taking any chances with that. Have them advancing clean through. The wild card teams, they were not in the World Series last year, but the Phillies will be in the playoffs this year. I had them at minus 235 just to make the playoffs, which factors in the possibility of division or wild card. So Phillies at minus 235. I have the Padres in at plus 132. And begrudgingly, I just can't find a 6 team I'm in love with. So why not New York Mets plus 200 to sneak in, make the playoffs, and let's roll with it.
All right, so I might be missing one team. I've got you giving the Dodgers and Braves the bye, and then Phillies, Padres, Mets in the wild card round. I guess I'm not missing the other team because then that would have to be the Cubs as the other division
Correct.
winner.
Correct. Yeah, sorry about that. The Cubs have other division, so I will roll right into that with the wild card series. Those Cubs will host the 6 seeded Mets and beat them. The Cubs over the Mets in the wild card series, and then I have the Phillies over the Padres in the other wild card series to usher in the teams on bye.
All right, and then once those teams get off of the bye, the Dodgers and Braves taking on the Phillies and Cubs respectively. How's the NLDS looking on your end?
So I do have, once the bye teams come in, I have the Dodgers rolling over the Phillies. And I do, just to add a little bit of calamity to it, I do have the Cubs over the Braves to set up a Cubs versus Dodgers NLCS, which I think would captivate the country.
I'm liking it. I feel like the Cubs are your team this year, and that would be really fun to see it happen. Maybe I'm going to have to watch Rookie of the Year tonight to really get in the spirit once some of the opening day festivities and the first day of the Sweet 16 have gone into the books. So with a Dodgers Cubs NLCS, how do you see that playing out?
Well, if I took the train there, why not just roll into the finish line at plus 1800, the Cubs to win the National League over the Dodgers?
All right, there we go. This is one where I definitely don't have the Cubs going that far. And if I'm wrong and you're right, I would enjoy nothing more than to watch that unfold before our eyes in October. When it comes to my NL playoff picture, kind of similar at the start, as I'm sure most people would have it. The Dodgers and the Braves both getting byes and bypassing the wild card rounds, getting home field advantage for the division series in the wild card round. I too have the Padres as a wild card. They're my 6th seed, and I have them upsetting your beloved Cubs this year as the 3 seed. So Padres over the Cubs for me in the wild card round. And then I too have the Phillies as a wild card team. They're my 4 seed over Cincinnati, who I slotted in as a 5 seed. Very low conviction on those 5 and 6 seeds, but like you said, just trying to make a case for something that would be fun and also plausible to a degree. Once we get to the division series, this is where it probably gets a lot more plausible and perhaps a bit less fun. Truly divisional in this sense. Dodgers over Padres, Braves over Phillies, and then in the NLCS, who would have guessed the Dodgers over the Braves? And in real time, I'm going to see what their odds are looking like to win the NL. Probably not much of a payout. Yeah, plus 180 is the first number I'm seeing, and that sounds about right. So you were taking literally 10x the long shot that I am. So I hope you are right. But between the two of us, it's looking like if we're seeing the Dodgers and or the Cubs come mid to late October, then at least one of us will be in a pretty good spot.
Absolutely. So it'll go from my Cubs are coming to New York to my Cubs are going to the World Series. It really rings off the tongue.
It does have that natural ring to it. Well, Connor, how much fun are we going to have in the American League when it comes to your postseason picture on the other side of things when it comes to who's going to end up opposing the NL in the World Series?
Well, speaking of fun, the kind of the dart throws I took to win the division resulted in perhaps the most impressive string of wild card teams I've ever seen in my entire life. I do have the Mariners and Blue Jays getting the byes, with the Twins being the other divisional winner. But then for the wild card teams, I have the Orioles, the Yankees, and the Astros, which just seems terrifying. Individually, just to make the playoffs, Baltimore was minus 240, Yankees minus 210, Astros minus 400. So at least on FanDuel, if you just parlayed those three to make the playoffs, it's 161 on the plus side. So, I just figured if you want to do that instead, just really, it's not a great number for those three on their own. So that was a lot. But long story short, Mariners and Blue Jays as the byes. Twins, the other division winner. The Orioles, Yankees, and Astros come in as wild cards. And in the wild card series, my beloved division winners start to get hammered here. Houston takes out the Twins rather easily, I think. And I do have Baltimore advancing over the Yankees to set up where the bye teams come in.
Got it. Okay. And then kind of like the National League structure, we can run through it. How do you see the ALDS and then ultimately the ALCS unfolding?
I loved picking Seattle for the division. I just don't think they're there yet to take out the Astros in the playoffs. So I do have the Astros over the Mariners, and I'm going to take the Orioles over the Blue Jays. So both of my teams that got byes get ousted in the division series, setting up a Baltimore versus Houston ALCS. And I will take the kiddos from Baltimore the Orioles at plus 650 to win the American League over the Astros.
All right, this is going to be a fun one because my two bye teams were Houston and Baltimore. So we're starting kind of where you left off with the ALCS and where you had a lot of chaos in terms of how teams were seeded. I think I took a perhaps more straightforward route to get to a fairly similar outcome here. I have Houston, the 1 seed, Baltimore, the 2 seed, wildcard series, Texas as the 6 seed and defending champs, knocking off Minnesota as the 3 seed, and then the Yankees as a 4 seed, ousting Toronto as a 5 seed. In the division series, similar to the National League, truly divisional in this sense, Texas over Houston, and then doubling down on Baltimore over the Yankees. My ALCS, the Rangers against the Orioles, and I too am going with Baltimore to claim the AL pennant. I didn't advance Houston to the ALCS like you did, but Baltimore over an AL West team in the ALCS. And in my case, Baltimore gets its revenge from last year's American League Division Series. So you've got the Cubs and the Orioles in the World Series. I too have the Orioles, so that would be a fun one to root for together. In my case, the Orioles would be taking on the Dodgers. Connor, how would you see the World Series unfolding if and when we do get to what would be a really fun matchup, the Cubs against Baltimore?
Yeah, it's great. We have a family playing the American League Championship Series, and I'm going to take our kiddos from Baltimore. Orioles at plus 1,400 to win the World Series over the Chicago Cubs. We'll call it 6 games. I just think with that lineup that they're going to get more and more experience throughout the year. I think bringing in Burns was a tremendous pickup for the pitching staff. I am in on the Orioles, and I can't wait to have a lot of fun, win or lose, seeing it happen.
All right. Well, you are just riding the fun wave all the way to the finish line. I have decided to step off once we get to the World Series. A rematch of the 1966 World Series, albeit a different result this time around. The Dodgers over Baltimore in 5 games. Dodgers available at plus 350 at DraftKings to win the World Series. And that number might sound woefully short for a team that needs to win the whole thing to cash a ticket, paying out as low in air quotes as plus 350. But for comparison's sake, that same bet, Dodgers to win the series, paying out less than 3-1 at Bookmaker. So, Connor, I know with the Dodgers, that is the boring pick. I'm kind of afraid to ask, given how fun things look on your side, what you would think of the Dodgers winning the series, even though you didn't have them going nearly that far. Let's see. You did have them in the NLDS advancing over the Phillies and then bowing out against the Cubs in the NLCS. So while your side of things looks really fun, any overall thoughts? I think I saw a glimpse of like the Brooklyn Dodgers kind of t-shirt going on. How would you feel if the Dodgers did indeed, there it is. How would you feel if the Dodgers did indeed end up winning the whole thing, even though it might feel like everybody would have seen it coming from a mile away?
Well, as I've grown and matured as a sports fan, I kind of take the same mindset of when the Patriots were like dominant in football. There was some fans that were saying, I can appreciate like a really great team just asserting itself and being great, and there's value in that. As a young Jet fan, I couldn't even fathom what the hell they were talking about, but got kind of now just seeing things like if the Dodgers really played their potential and just played like a beautiful like movie script, like crisp brand of baseball where they really just assert dominance. I think there is value in that. So if they go all the way and really have a historical year, I definitely wouldn't be hating on that. In my more sophisticated sports fandom, that would be a-okay by me.
I like that comparison you draw. And as you share that, I think about growing up and just despising the Yankees. It was the, Jeter, Posada, Pettit, Rivera, the core 4, plus a bunch of other superstars. Every big free agent seemed to end up there. And now I think, wow, my favorite team has an owner who just doesn't like to spend on the roster. At least he used to spend for quote unquote superstars who would then come in and underperform. But now he's just not spending on anything, no organizational infrastructure. And at least when teams have ownership that's willing to put some skin in the game and invest and try to win, I can respect that if nothing else. So my experience growing up despising the Yankees and now respecting teams that really make an honest go at it. I don't know, honesty and integrity might be tough things to judge from our end, but like just at least putting forth a true effort, putting their money where their mouth is. I've come to respect that much more than despise it, because at the end of the day, if somebody owns a Major League Baseball team or an NFL team, they can probably afford to spend as much as just about any other owner if they really wanted to. And when people get just tight-fisted and don't want to do it, especially when those are my teams, that's really tough to stomach. So I've come to appreciate it with time when teams really do make a serious run at it. So I'm with you in that kind of evolving over time. I think this conversation would have been much different the first time we exchanged predictions when we were roommates on 11C at Boston University. But here we are in 2024. And I like your word. I think a little touch of sophistication, perhaps. Hopefully, it's still just as much fun as ever. But if we're evolving over time, then that's probably a healthy sign. And let's see what we're thinking this year when it comes to the MVP markets. Connor, last year, Betts was your pick. Are you going back to the well, or do you have somebody different in mind this time around?
So I'm thinking with the big step forward I see, or last year was a big step back, but the return to relevance for the Padres, I'm thinking if Tatis Jr. can get, because I think my running theme for MVPs now, Ohtani is in a class by himself, but I think what Acuna did last year was I think he's going to turn this MVP award with the new rules in the game and what Acuna did last year. I got a feeling the voters are going to look for a five-tool player. I don't think unless you're going to mash 25 more home runs than everyone else, I don't think there's going to be much of a premium on power. So I'm going to go for a kind of a speed guy in AL and NL. I think if Tatis can get to 30-30, and it's tough to make this pick because Tatis is basically just like a B plus Acuna. So something would acknowledge like have to kind of go wrong, a big slump for Acuna. But I think at plus 1,000, Tatis Jr. for the NL MVP is right where I want to be in terms of realistic, can steal bases, can hit homers, and it's right where I want to be.
Yeah, especially with the rule changes last year, making base stealing a much bigger part of the game. You can see where that five-tool component comes into play. And at a 10-1 price point, I can't fault your logic there at all. On my end, I'm going to say that just like I was early on Acuna in the past, I'm going to say that you were early on Mookie Betts last year and take a flyer on Betts for the purposes of this show, plus 650 on DraftKings and FanDuel. Shorter odds at Sharper Offshore Books, bookmaker in their range of 5-1. So I also like just a touch of value, perhaps, with some of the sharper books, implying that it's more likely than some of the more recreational books that Betts could indeed claim the hardware. Speaking of those 5-1-ish odds that bookmaker has on Betts to win the MVP, 5-1 is pretty much the market consensus price on Acuna as a rightful favorite. With him, I'm just a bit scared off by a knee injury. I don't like taking someone starting the season with health concerns, especially when speed is a much bigger part of the game, as you touched on. And you've also touched on a risk with players on star-studded teams. There's that cannibalization component. And I think that Ohtani is a big name who could be a potential threat to Betts' odds most years. But two things that neutralize that threat this year. One, Ohtani not pitching, that two-way player factor doesn't apply this time around. And then two, again, the optics around that gambling scandal. He might be completely innocent, but the perception around all this could only hurt him in the eyes of MVP voters. So that's one less threat on his own team to Mookie Betts making a good run here. And speaking of the way that voters could look at this award, I think a key to winning the MVP is often a good narrative. And Betts switching positions from right field to shortstop could be a huge plus in that sense. I wasn't following baseball closely for most of the offseason. I thought that I heard a local news reporter getting their facts wrong when they referred to Betts as Dodgers shortstop Mookie Betts. And this could be beneficial, not just for the defensive metrics, shortstop being a premium position, but also for the novelty factor. Players and voters alike might just be marveling more than ever at Betts' pure athleticism based on what we see in 2024.
It's a really good point. Yeah. Dodgers shortstop Mookie Betts is going to take me at least 2 months. That's a lot. That's a lot to handle for sure. I think he played second for Boston a few times, but yeah, he's really had an amazing career, Mookie Betts.
Yeah, if we wanted to make a drinking game out of San Diego Chargers, Oakland Raiders, and somebody not getting it correct, Dodgers shortstop Mookie Betts, then I think people, might be well on their way to a big day of drinking before noon, just like when we started this conversation. Connor, in the American League, how is the MVP going to shape up as you see it?
really took the same strategy and took the same guy from last year, Julio Rodriguez. I think, as you're saying, baseball loves a good story. I think baseball really, really, really wants Julio Rodriguez to be the guy for the next decade. And I think if the baseball writers have any opportunity to make a claim, if he as well gets to 30 steals, that 30-30 number, it's an archaic number, but it still means something for sure. So as long as no one really completely matches it, and with Otani out of the picture, all bets are off, so to speak. With Otani out of the picture, it's really a wide open race. So I will double down Julio to get his Mariners hopefully a division title, I predicted, and put up some big numbers along the way.
Julio's an interesting one because as you were breaking that down, I took a quick look at the odds. 6-1 at DraftKings, 10-1 at FanDuel. That's a pretty big delta. So again, in markets like this, if you are going to be placing any money on it, you don't have to have 20 books and shop around all day long. But even if it's just looking at 2 or maybe 3 different books, you can find a big discrepancy in value being offered. So keep that in mind. And since FanDuel is widely available to bettors in regulated US states, Connor, let's peg that price point at 10-1 for the purposes of your pick there. And this is a rare case where I'm going to take a longer shot than you. Historically, that has not been a good sign, but I think this is one that you would enjoy if Rodriguez doesn't take it home. I'm going to go with Adley Rutschman, 25-1 at FanDuel. This aligns with both of our bullishness on Baltimore. I also think it aligns with that narrative component, an up-and-coming star. He seems like a very likable player on a very likable team right now. And keeping that cannibalization factor in mind that we touch on in the NL, a lot of our bigger favorites could have that flare up. Aaron Judge and Juan Soto on the Yankees, Yordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker on the Astros. Now, Gunnar Henderson might steal some of Rutschman's thunder in Baltimore, but we're a lot farther down the board at that point than we are with those teammates on the Yankees and the Astros. And speaking of being farther down the board, the aforementioned price for Rutschman, 25-1 at FanDuel. At Bookmaker, it's in the ballpark of 15-1. And for comparison's sake, at 15-1, your break-even probability for this bet is 6.25%. At 25-1, you become profitable if he wins it nearly 3.85% of the time. So not to get too mathematical there, but if this true probability is somewhere in the range of 4 or 5%, it goes from being a losing proposition at 15-1 to a profitable proposition at the price point of 25-1. Connor, any thoughts on the slim possibility, but a non-zero possibility, nevertheless, of Rutschman claiming the MVP this season?
No, I think it's a good pick, because I feel like a casual baseball fan, we've heard about Adley Rutschman forever now. I feel like he's been so a really positive figure in the game, that he's been followed throughout the minor league stints. And, when he was called up, it was a huge deal. It was a huge story, him finding out. So I do think if the Orioles go as far as we think they are, he is definitely the face of that franchise. And again, in a league starved for new stars for now and the future, he definitely qualifies.
All right, some fun with the MVP awards. Let's see how fun it is in the Cy Young Award market as well. Connor, what's your pick for NL Cy Young Award winner?
NL Cy Young, we're getting fun. We're getting fun. Maybe I just bored myself taking 2 pretty fringy top 5 MVP guys. I went through the list, and the name that popped off, he's got the team to do it. Chris Sale down in Atlanta. If he has a revival back to where he was, he is a strikeout machine. He's going to play the Washington Nationals a whole bunch. I have at plus 3,000 Chris Sale, just taking a flyer on. I know Spencer Strider gets a lot more headlines on his own team, but I think if the Braves dominate like we think they will, and Sale has those strikeout numbers and just stays healthy, I think that number does not represent his ability and his true odds to win it if he stays healthy. A big if.
I like that look a lot. And that's when, on the same podcast I mentioned earlier, Gil Alexander's Beating the Book Pod, he had Jason Weingarten on the show. Jason is a better, well-known as Spreadopedia in sports gambling circles on Twitter. And he mentioned some bullishness on Sale, a lot of the same reasons that you cited. And at 30-1, if you can get a healthy season, then that could provide a lot of value. I stayed with the Braves after whipping on a Brave last year and Max Fried, but much more straight down the middle on my end this year, going back to the well in Atlanta with Spencer Strider. And as you kind of touch on, I don't have to sell this one hard. It's reflected in the price at plus 450 at DraftKings. It's just hard for me to get around the fact that he projects to be a clear-cut ace on a clearly elite team. And by the way, maybe that mustache boosts the probability by about 10%. So we'll take that as icing on the cake, just in case it means anything.
That's a nice one. Yeah, he's the whole staff is strong. Still have Freed and Strider and Sale, Charlie Morton. He's still chugging along. He's really old, but he can still get it done. The Braves are going to be a wagon this year.
Well, a lot more fun for you sticking with the same team, but a lot more fun for you going with Chris Sale compared to my pick of Spencer Strider in the NL. Connor, how about AL Cy Young?
I tamed things down quite a bit here. I'm going to go Corbin Burns with Baltimore. He's won the award before, so obviously there's no hesitation. The voters voting for him. I think if he comes along to Baltimore as the guy that anchors the rotation, that finally puts the Orioles way over the top, I have no hesitation. I had plus 700. He's right near the top of the list where you find him, but plus 700 Corbin Burns. Feeling comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'm seeing him at 7-1 at DraftKings, 8-1 on FanDuel. So might as well take the 8-1 where you can get it. But in that price range, I hear you on it being maybe a bit more boring than the Sale pick, but quite logical nevertheless. And in my case, I'm going to double down on a guy that you've already mentioned, George Kirby. Took that 60-1 flyer last year. And as you said, he finished in the top 10. A key part of the handicap here for me, once again, this year, I touched on it last year, his durability. He made 31 starts, 190 innings pitched. I kind of feel like 190 was maybe almost something to scoff at as we were coming up. But these days, maybe 170, 180 innings is the new 200. So to get to 190 and make 31 starts is really saying something. Last year, he led all of Major League Baseball with less than 1 walk per 9 innings. And this wasn't a Phil Hughes type minimizing walks, perhaps at the expense of strikeouts. Kirby still posted more than 8 strikeouts per 9. And because of that, we are seeing a much different price point this year, 12-1 at both DraftKings and FanDuel. But if Kirby can build on last year's success, I think he's a very real contender. And of course, as you touched on, he is from my wife's hometown of Rye, New York. So this is also a partially emotional pick, but I'm not about to miss out on the bragging rights if and when it comes to fruition.
Oh, absolutely. And we're sure going to need that with my Mariners divisional pick. I'll be cheering for him like crazy every start he makes.
All right, and let's see what teams you'll be cheering for like crazy, or perhaps cheering against like crazy, depending on which way you want to take it, over or under. We will move on to our regular season win total beer bet for this year. Connor, I think we can just go like one pick at a time. I know with the postseason structure, I kind of just ran through all of your picks, then all of mine. For this, we can kind of volley back and forth, if you will. Starting with you, what is the first regular season win total bet that you would like to share?
So I'm going to have a theme here. New faces, new places as far as managers go. I'm going to Cleveland for the first one. I had FanDuel this morning at 79.5 for Cleveland, and I'm going to take that under. I think the Francona loss just really can do significant things structurally in a negative way, just not having him as a focal point, as a beacon. The offense looks really, really, really slim, and I will take Cleveland going under 79.5.
Yep, and that 79.5 minus 110 at FanDuel, even money at DraftKings. So I hear you on Cleveland under 79.5. And my theme, I think I'll have 2 themes for my purposes this year in our beer bet. One, fading human achievement, and not because I want to, kind of dovetailing with the second component here, doing so in a way that I'm trying to use as a logic-driven input rather than too much emotion entering the picture here, picking up discrepancies between some sharper books and some perhaps more square lines. And on that note, my first bet will be an under, the first of 3 unders, spoiler alert for me, Colorado under 60.5 wins, minus 120 at DraftKings. A little bit of extra vig here, but nothing too prohibitive or out of the ordinary. What caught my eye here is that bookmaker is at 59.5, shaded heavily to the under. So it's basically like picking up a free game by doing a little bit of line shopping. And I get the public sentiment that it's not fun to bet on teams to lose, especially to lose more than 100 games. But if there's one team in the majors that has the ability to do so, I think Colorado may have what it takes to lose at least 102 this season.
Wow. Not to make us the curmudgeons of MLB 2024, but I have three unders as well. So we're going to be, I guess, just hating on a bunch of teams. And
Maybe we've learned our lesson the hard way with a lot of overs over the years. So let's see what could possibly go wrong. Hopefully, a lot goes wrong for some teams with these unders that we're eyeing. So I guess I already know to tee it up is Connor. What is the second under that you're looking to play this season?
So I figured if Milwaukee had been so good to me the last few years with Craig Counsell at the helm, now that he's gone to the Cubs, I'm seeing that Brewers at 77.5. I'm taking that under as well. Kind of the whole king of the show around there. Mr. Stearns came to the Mets about a year and a half ago. And now with Counsell and manager leaving, I just don't see it. And of course, Burns, my Cy Young winner, being dealt away, I just don't see them getting to 78 and beyond. I am going to take the Brewers for a down year under 77.5.
All right, so a team in the Central Division of each league that you are fading out of the gates here. When it comes to my second under, this is one that won't surprise you at all. It may surprise some listeners who see me in the paraphernalia of my beloved Angels, the t-shirt, the spring training visor. Spring training tends to be where the Angels peak. Once we get to the regular season, I'm looking at them under 72.5 wins, seeing that at a flat -110 at DraftKings and FanDuel. Bookmaker, for comparison's sake, 72.5, same number, but shaded heavily to the under at -146. And Circa Sports, which is widely considered to be the sharpest regulated book in the country, all the way down to 71 on the Angels win total. And it's rare to find a delta of a game and a half this late in the offseason. But surprise, surprise, despite my fandom, I am deciding to side with the sharper books when it comes to this one. Looking at the Angels lineup, Mike Trout, awesome player, hasn't played more than 140 games since 2016. Anthony Rendon making $38 million this year, and he may or may not still care about playing baseball. When it comes to the rotation, the team refused to address it this offseason. Their opening day starter today, Patrick Sandoval, I'm rooting for him, but his track record doesn't exactly scream ace material. One silver lining here, and an area where I'd love to be proven wrong, some exciting young players like Logan O'Hoppe at catcher, Zach Neto at shortstop, so it would be fun to see what they can do in terms of their development. But overall, I'm just out of reasons to hold out hope for this team as long as Artie Moreno is still the owner. I can't recall feeling less optimistic about the Angels heading into a season. And I feel like this is when they start to pay the price for botching the opportunity to trade Ohtani and rebuild their foundation. And this is me putting my beer money where my mouth is.
Yeah, well said. I feel like they're currently in that state where the Mets probably would have been if they didn't have a cajillionaire as their owner, kind of putting financial band-aids on everything. Cause it was really the same with the Mets. They really went all in, completely swung and missed, but money really talks in that regard where you just bandage it up. Not to say the Mets are, on the fast lane to success right now, but just that hopelessness that you used to feel under the old ownership really, hopefully, is a thing of the past. Which will take me to my third under, which I did have a theme for my first two. The theme of the first two was a new manager, new places. My theme for the last one is that the Washington Nationals stink. And we are going to go under 66.5 is what I found this morning, I believe, on FanDuel. I just don't see it with the Braves out there, with the Phillies. If the Mets are going to do what I think they are, the Marlins are frisky. I do not know where these wins are coming from to get anywhere near 66. I really don't know.
All right, fair enough. I think between my under on Colorado and your under on Washington, we're not afraid to go under some low numbers. I think back in the day, the thought was at the extremes, play the high win totals under, play the low win totals over. But I think those days are gone when it comes to betting value. The market is too sophisticated, so I cannot find one hole to poke in your argument there. My third under will be Minnesota under 86.5 wins. I'm seeing that for reduced VIG -105 at DraftKings and FanDuel. And this runs counter to my prediction, both of our predictions for Minnesota to win the division. But I don't consider it to be too much of a deviation because I'm only predicting one playoff team from the AL Central. So it might not take a great record to win it. And once again, for comparison's sake, Bookmaker posting 85.5 as the number for Minnesota. Almost identical VIG to the DraftKings and FanDuel prices attached to 86.5. And a one-game discrepancy here might sound meaningless, but on the off chance that Minnesota goes 86 and 76, that's the difference between winning and losing this bet. So Minnesota under 86.5 to round things out for me. Connor, I've got you down to give a rapid-fire summary here. I've got you down for Cleveland under 79.5, Milwaukee under 77.5, and Washington under 66.5. On my end, we've got Colorado under 60.5, the Angels under 72.5, and Minnesota under 86.5. 600s. That's a first for us in this bet. At least it guarantees that, unlike the first two times we did this in podcast form, we can't go head to head if we're on unders across the board. Connor, last order of business as far as this bet is concerned, we need a tiebreaker in case we both finish with the same record. So go ahead, and the floor is yours to either choose your favorite pick or what you would consider to be my worst pick. And then if we do finish with the same record, this tiebreaker will determine who owes the hops to whom.
So my favorite pick, I will go with Cleveland under the 79.5.
All right. So I guess I might have to be rooting for the Guardians when they're matched up against the Twins in September. That is going to be riveting television, but we will put that down and we'll see how this unfolds over the months to come. And Connor, as we start to round the corner here, we can weave in two final pillars of the show, the Malinsky Minute and the Hops. When it comes to the Malinsky Minute, last year when we had this conversation, we pivoted to the Jets right about this time. We can do so again right now because a year ago, your Jets were on the verge of signing Aaron Rodgers. There was tons of optimism around the team. It lasted all of 4 plays, if I recall correctly. And it reminded me that one of Dave's wisest sayings that has really stuck with me over time was the notion of the occupational privilege tax. Basically, this was his framework for processing bad beats before they even happened. When it comes to injuries, bad calls, bad balances, it sucks to see it happen in real time, but we know it's part of the game. And if you accept it up front, if and when it happens, you're already fully equipped to move on without skipping a beat. I think Dave did that as well as anybody I've ever met. So easier said than done, but as a bit of a retrospective here, Connor, what do you recall about how you reacted to the Rodgers injury?
My brother and I were in the stands that opening night. I could not be more excited for the year. But not to say I saw it coming, but in watching the Hard Knocks, the training camp leading up to the season, and just how the buffoons that the Jets coaching staff showed themselves as, I think we all had a feeling of like, man, imagine if Rodgers wasn't here to completely save these idiots. Like they just the whole everything was a joke. Austin Powers this, Austin Powers that. No, we got our just nothing seemed to matter. And sure enough, 4 plays in, because of an offensive line that wasn't put together the right way, him being out, it was just like a wow, but like a okay, it's gonna happen. And it looks like they've learned their lessons a little bit, but being in the stands, luckily the Jets had a remarkable punt return to win that game, but the silence from that went into the third quarter. It was a very surreal, just electricity down to it was very, very surreal. But yeah, not the best night. But again, it's like Dave would suggest that there was cookie crumbs that something like that could happen. There really was, and we should have saw it coming.
It's interesting to hear that you picked up on something along these lines potentially being in the fold while watching Hard Knocks. It's easy in hindsight to say this, but I'm rarely watching a game in real time, especially in the first few plays, and drawing any meaningful takeaways. But I feel like even before the 4th play, when he went down, there seemed to be multiple plays where he was under duress immediately. And I just had a thought, I did not foresee this type of injury coming so quickly. But I was like, man, he's under a lot of pressure. And then suddenly the season's over before it really started. But I hope you stayed for the game because, as I recall, it must have been quite the roller coaster ride. I mean, watching it on TV, I think the game was on September 11th with the Jets hosting. That obviously meant a lot. So the pregame pomp and circumstance, and then the Rodgers injury, very deflating. The way it ended couldn't have been much more of a thrill for Jets fans. So I hope you stuck around and caught the end of it. And maybe it was too early, but it was a peak for the season, nevertheless, that you would have gotten to witness firsthand.
We absolutely stuck it out. One of the best. I think I've had season tickets for 14 years now. I think there was the Patriots game in overtime way back in 2015, but those 2 games are the top 2 by far in all of our years. So we're glad we stuck it out. You heard a lot of fans saying, Zach Wilson is the guy. Aaron taught him. He's going to wait. He just beat the Bills and that quickly died down. But that night in a vacuum, it was never forget. Never forget.
And not to cut too deep, but was that Patriots game in 2015 you referenced, was that the famous Matthew Slater, we want to kick overtime game?
I believe it was. Yeah, I know they won on a Fitzpatrick lob to Eric Decker, and I think that was
Mm-hmm.
on the first drive. Yeah, I think that was the exact one.
Yeah, I think when overtime, I guess it still is in the regular season if you score a touchdown on the first possession, the game is over. But that was when the Patriots won the toss and deferred. And in hindsight, kind of like Belichick going for it, on 4th and 2 against the Colts way back when, and it backfired when Peyton Manning led a game-winning drive. There was actually some very cogent thought that went into the decision, but because it ran so counter to conventional wisdom and immediately blew up in his face, those were some very memorable moments. Connor, speaking of memorable moments, you touched on the Jets perhaps learning their lesson from the surrounding cast they gave Rodgers last year. Another seemingly strong offseason this year, reinforcing the offensive line, adding Mike Williams, and as a nice little bonus, perhaps, some division competition looking at the Miami Dolphins. They might be in for a reset year, so that might clear the path a bit for the Jets. Keeping all that, as well as the occupational privilege tax in mind, how do you feel about the Jets' prospect for the upcoming 2024 season?
Much better than before free agency. I was a very slow burn that Joe Douglas did as general manager. People were, the first day, what are we doing? Is his phone not working? Where is his Wi-Fi not on? But as they say, free agency should be something that supplements a structure. And I don't think Douglas wants to run out and just spend. Tyron Smith was a name that I was like, it was a luxury. It was like, man, that would be sweet, but you don't think it's going to happen. But getting that update that's going to happen, they're really going in on this year. They got 2 linemen with Smith and Moses, and they got Mike Williams. So that was like the must-haves for number 10 pick. So I still think they should go young offensive line to kind of build this foundation going forward. Brock Bowers' name has entered the fray as, a Rodgers like little jack of all trades. So much, much better than before free agency started. But as last year taught us, anything with Rodgers will be a joy and wonderful to see as long as it lasts, but very bullish right now.
Yeah, and of course, I've got to throw out there Tyron Smith, great USC Trojan, Mike Williams, great Charger. So we'll share some rooting interest. If the Jets can make a run at the AFC East, I will be right there rooting them along with you. And Connor, with some hops to bookend the show, you are one of my top guys on the ground when it comes to seeking out the latest and greatest in the New York beer scene. Last year, you had a nice shout out to Montauk Brewing Company at this part of the show. Any good local beer or brewery discovers since that 2023 conversation?
Just to keep the vibes going, Bucket Brigade Brewery in New Jersey. I cannot say enough about this Irish goodbye. So I'm going to do a double down shout out to them. It was a wonderful beer for St. Patrick's Day. It goes down nice and smooth for a baseball game. I'll be looking for this at Citi Field. Hopefully they go out there, and because Citi Field does a great job with craft brews. So I'll happily shout out Bucket Brigade Brewery for the Irish goodbye, and I'll be sampling a lot more of theirs in the future.
All right, I will put that one on my radar for future visits back east. And Irish Goodbye sounds like a great beer by the way you're describing it. Fortunately, no Irish Goodbye for the purposes of this conversation. We will wrap it up on a more proper note. Connor, I can't thank you enough. This is one of my favorite annual traditions. Really appreciate you doing your part to keep things going strong. And I also cannot wait to see you soon in Las Vegas.
This was so fun, Matt. Thank you so much.
And to the audience, thanks as always for tuning in. Enjoy opening day across Major League Baseball.